Well, hello, my friend. It is such an honor to be with you today, and thank you for joining us for Boundless Voices. It is my prayer that you will be equipped to do the thing that is in your heart to do, that you will not settle, that you will continue to pursue consistently the thing that you know you are supposed to be doing. I have the honor and privilege of sharing with you today about authoring and podcasting, the two main things that I do with my life, and so it is a privilege to be able to serve you and hopefully impart to you the hard wisdom that took me a very long time to learn, and I'm hoping to cut your learning curve and offer you wisdom that will help you on your journey. But before I dive into my material, I want to share this with you. Friend, the market is not oversaturated. You might feel like, Ashley, there were 1.2 million books published in 2018. There are thousands upon thousands upon thousands of podcasts done by amazing people who have very big teams. What the heck could I possibly offer? And I want to say to you that you have a unique voice, and whatever you were created to contribute is the exact thing that we need. So the market is not oversaturated. We need what you were created to give us, and we are not the same without you. And so just remember that no matter where you're coming from, no matter what you're facing, no matter what obstacles might be in your way, homeschooling kids, or you might have just finished school, or you're just not sure what next steps to take, we're going to help you be able to get there, because again, we need what you were created to give us. God gave you a unique and special voice, and we need it, especially for this time in history. So my name is Ashley Abercrombie, and I am the author of Rise of the Truth Teller. Own your story, tell it like it is, and live with holy gumption. It is the first book that I personally have written, and it was released last October. And I was a ghostwriter for years. I wrote on 10 different books. I have edited tons of books, worked on book proposals, coached writers, worked collaboratively within writing teams to cultivate voices and lead communications. And I have always loved writing. It's been something I have done since I was a very little girl. And communication is one of my giftings. So I love to speak, I love to teach. And so podcasting was right up my alleyway. I'm the host of the Why Though podcast with my dear friend Tiffany Bloom, who's also an author and speaker, and she lives in Tacoma, Washington. I live down here in Los Angeles, and it's been a wonderful opportunity for us to tackle the biggest questions of the world, the existential crises that we all might be facing, as well as the smallest things that make life wonderful and beautiful to live. And so we're two friends who have a great conversation that we release every single Thursday, and we have grown our podcast to 10,000 downloads a month, which is huge. And we are so thrilled to be able to do it. We're not experts. We're just two girls who decided to work it out and figure it out. And I'm going to share with you how we did that, because my desire is to cut your learning curve and equip you to move forward in your voice and to decide what you want to author and make a pathway for you to be able to create that, or whatever podcast you want to create to help you create a pathway in your life for you to be able to do that. So I want to tackle some writing and some authoring stuff first, okay? So I want to give you a couple of just axioms, if you will, around writing that I think are extremely important. And again, I've been writing for 20 years. It's been my side hustle, and in the last couple of years has been my full-time role. And I think that I have a lot I could give you. And in the years that I have been working and writing and also working with other writers, I believe I can help you with some of these axioms, and I'm going to give you some practical how-tos when it comes to releasing your book into the world, from book proposals to agents to traditional versus self-publishing. We're going to talk about all of it. So let me just set you up with a few little axioms. So when you think about writing, I want you to first ruthlessly tell the truth. You have to drill down into the marrow of what it is that you want to communicate and ruthlessly tell the truth. I love what Ernest Hemingway says. He says, write hard and clear about what hurts. Don't you love that? Because isn't that some of the best material that you've ever read? If you were to pause for a minute and think about a great screenplay or a great poem or a great novel or an incredible nonfiction story that really moved you, most of the time it involves an incredible context of problems or pain or issues or some sort of contextual tension that draws you in and makes you want to engage with that story. And so that's important, that we write hard and clear about what hurts. So ruthlessly tell the truth. The next thing is to write first, edit later. If you have on your writer and your editor hat, you're going to be at war with yourself the entire time. So sometimes you just have to sit down and turn that editor off, because perfection is not our goal. Progress is the goal. Writing is the goal. And so you got to turn off that editor and just write. You can pick up the editor hat later. And I love what Anne Lamott says. She talks about crappy first drafts, although she uses a much different word, of course. Crappy first drafts. Like the first time you write something, it's not going to be good. It's not supposed to be good, but there'll be a nugget inside there that will be revolutionary for the pathway you want to go on your writing. So write first, edit later. So the next thing I want to tell you is to remember basic grammar and syntax. Now, it's important that we learn this, but just because you struggle with spelling or you struggle with where to place your commas or some of the stylistically things that might feel challenging to you, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be writing. Not all of us can afford to go to a college and get a degree. Not all of us have had an educational background or coaches or people who provide input or great teachers that allowed us to really flourish in our gifts. So just because you struggle with syntax or struggle with grammar doesn't mean you shouldn't be writing. Your brain is incredible. Your mind is beautiful. You have an intellect that God created and made, and we want to see you use it. So just remember word choice, write and rewrite, move things around, delete useless or repetitive words and phrases because they weaken your voice. So just continue to get concise and clear in the thing you want to say. Remember basic grammar and syntax. Next, remember that your audience is smart. I'm huge on this. Show, don't tell. Your audience is not dumb. Do more sharing and relating than you do preaching to people. Make sure that instead of telling them, that you take time to really show them and dive into a story with them. Enter and engage into their context by entering honestly into your own and be able to really pull something out. Your audience is not dumb. Don't try to explain things that are already implied. And remember, if you assume that your audience is smart, you're going to write better. Read your writing out loud. This is a great pro tip, a great axiom for writers. As soon as you finish it, just take a moment to read it out loud before you post that blog, before you post that micro blog on Instagram, or that little post that you want to share about maybe a difficult topic, like something that might be happening right now in the media or the news, or you want to talk about politics or religion or maybe race or justice. Read it out loud. And if you stumble over something, chances are your readers will too. So read your writing out loud. And listen, please be a reader. Read is another axiom. Do not call yourself a writer if you are not a reader. It is really important that you read. And remember, everything that you take in is the thing that you're going to put out. So make sure you're reading. Set a time to write. This is so important. And here's one of my little phrases that I say to every writer I work with. Content is king, but consistency is key. So what if you write something great 2 times a year? You're not consistent enough for anybody to be able to see it, or for you to really grow in your craft, or to develop people who want to continue to read your work. So great. Content should always be king. Focus on your content. Focus on what you're writing. Don't just put stuff out there to put stuff out there, but at the same time, be consistent, okay? And that doesn't mean you have to show up with some life-changing revelation every single day. It just means in all the things that you do, show up and be present, and show up daily, and show up and be available. Set times to write, okay? Join a writer's group. Start a writer's group. Do something online with some people. Just figure out a way that you can be really consistent. Take a class. Lots of colleges offer classes. I took many at UCLA. There's Gotham Writers online where you can begin to get in writer's group. It's awesome. Make sure you find a way to stay consistent. And last thing, be you. It's so important. Nobody else on the earth can write and do what you were created to write and do. You're the only one with your story. You're the only one with your lens and perspective. Might it sound like someone else's? Sure. But be you, okay? Don't try to be like anybody else. Be wholly yourself. Grab onto all the influences that you want. I do that too. But show up as yourself. So I want to read you one more quote by Anne Lamott, who's the author of Bird by Bird. And she has this great book, and I want you to read it. If you are a writer, you need to read this book, Bird by Bird, Some Instructions on Writing and Life. And she'll make you laugh. She'll make you cry. She'll make you feel so understood when you're procrastinating or get writer's block or just sitting at a computer or cleaning your whole house and eating a bag of tortilla chips. Like, she will make you feel very seen, okay? Read Anne Lamott. And she says this: because this business of becoming conscious, of being a writer, is ultimately about asking yourself, how alive am I willing to be? Woo, I love that. So when you're writing, tell the whole truth. And how alive are you willing to be? Because that's the best writing. Okay, so I want to talk to you a little bit about self-publishing versus traditional publishing. So you get to make that decision. There's no wrong way to do it. In fact, in 2018, self-publishing jumped 40%. How awesome is that? Probably because there's way more resources and tools available to people who want to self-publish. It's actually very easy to do something like that on Amazon. There's lots of different ways that you could self-publish. And especially if you have a good following, or you just want to get it out there, or you tend to speak at a lot of events and different conferences, this is a great route for you. Or traditional publishing, okay? So traditional publishing is a really great way to get your book out there as well. And it involves much more of a kind of linear step-by-step process, which I'm going to talk about here very quickly. But I want you to know that either way you choose is great way. I have friends who have self-published many books and have friends who have gone the traditional publishing route. So there's no wrong way to do it. You just get research both and decide what would be best for you, for your lifestyle, and for your season of life, okay? So here's the 3 things that publishers really want to know. Your concept, okay? Is it strong? Is it fresh? Is it upfront about the boldest thing that you want to say? My agent taught me that little phrase. Am I being upfront about the boldest thing that I want to say? And remember, there's nothing new under the sun. So you're not going to suddenly invent some idea that no one's ever written about or no one's ever thought about or no one's ever talked about before. But you will be able to put a fresh angle or a fresh perspective on an old and hidden truth that people want to know about. And so you got to go ahead and know, am I being upfront with my concept? Do I have it down to a little hook statement? Do I have a 2-sentence elevator pitch that I can share with somebody? And you want to put that straight into a proposal. Identify your genre, find comparison titles, all those things, but be thinking about your concept and idea. The second thing is writing. The writing has to be good. It has to be excellent, engaging. It has to be clearly lining up with the concept and the idea. And does the flow of the book always tie back to that main idea, that hook statement, that concept that you have created? And the third thing they're looking at is platform, okay? Publishers and agents will want to know, do you have an established platform or a growing platform? And most of the time many publishers want all 3, kind of the bigger houses where you see a lot of big and famous authors, they're going to want all 3 of those things. But there are plenty of houses that would be happy to take 2 out of 3. I had a much smaller platform when I started with this process. In fact, on Instagram at the time, I had less than 3,000 followers. I had basically none on Twitter. I didn't even have a Facebook page yet for my author page. And so sometimes they will go, wow, this concept is really great. This content is really good. And this platform is not huge, but it's growing. And I got several offers just based on those 2 things. Sometimes even just having 2 out of the 3. I will say here with platform that it can feel really disappointing in the process, because there were several publishers that I loved that came back to me and said, you know what? We love this writing. It is a cut above. We loved her work. We love her concept, but our platform is just not where we need it to be in order to take this author on. And so just know that platform really does matter. And so be working on that. Read some books about that. Get into a course about that. Like, I'm sure one of the other things that we've offered here today would help you and bless you in growing your platform, because you actually really do need to do that. My recommendation, if you're putting together a book proposal, is to go to Michael Hyatt's website and download his book proposal template. It will bless you. It is the exact one that I used. And then we had my agent design it with a person that she works with. We were able to design it and make it really nice when we send out to publishers. But you want to look at that template, get that settled in your heart. And the proposal takes a long time. So it can feel a little bit overwhelming because you're like, what the heck? This is a lot. But the proposal is a really important part of the process. And it took me 9 months to work mine all the way through, but I had a 3-month book deadline. And by then I already knew every single story that was going into the book. I knew exactly how my chapters were going to be laid out because I really took my time with the proposal. And I used the proposal to get my agent, and I used the proposal to get my publisher. And so there's lots of ways that you can query and work things out and figure that out. But Michael Hyatt will be a great resource to you. Another great person to look at is Tim Grahl. He's an excellent resource for you in this process. Okay, so I'm going to switch gears and move over to podcasting. I hope that was really helpful to you. I know that I just am fire hosing you with information today, but I just think it's really important for you to have some of these resources and tips and tools, and I'm hoping that some of this will really stick for you. All right, so let's talk podcast. So our Why Though podcast, like I said, Tiffany and I were a bunch of rookies, and we just had no margin and no time. We both have little kids. I have a 2-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a baby on the way, and Tiffany has a 9-year-old and a 5-year-old as well. And so we didn't have a lot of time. We both work from home. We both are authors and speakers, and so we just didn't have extra margin in our life. So we had to make a decision about how we were going to do the podcast. We also had no budget and no resource in order to do our podcast. And so that's important to say to you too, because sometimes you can feel like, I need $300 an episode to have someone edit this and take care of this. And we just made a decision in our hearts, like, these are the areas we're going to grow in, and we're going to suck it up, sailor, and do it. And so I take care of all the graphics and kind of our artsy side. I write all the show notes because it's kind of, as a writer, and she's a writer too, but she's great at the technical stuff. And so Tiffany does our intro and outro. She adds that to every single episode. we made a decision to just be one hit wonder. So we're at like a 25-minute episode. We record it in one sitting. And then all she really has to do is pop on the intro and pop on the outro. And so that has really helped us to sort of have the lanes that we run in and take care of. And then she loads it to all the different outlets, from iTunes to Spotify, all the different places that you'd be able to find a podcast. She loads it all there. So that's kind of her side of the equation. All right, so we have no time. Like I said, we don't do guests on our show either. And the only reason that we don't do guests, and we may do some in the future, but the reason that we don't do guests currently is just because, again, margin. So what I want you to do is really make a decision about who you are, what's your true capacity, what season of life are you in, and what can you really give? For example, do you need to do seasons of a podcast so that you can launch 8 per week at a time? And then, 1 per week for 8 weeks at a time. Or are you like me and Tiffany, where you have the margin to record 25 minutes every week and load that thing up? But you have to decide, what kind of consistency can I create and cultivate? Maybe you're a once a month podcaster because you want to have a really great guest, or whatever you might want to do on your podcast. That's all awesome. But you have to be realistic, because remember, content is king, but consistency is key. So if you don't have a plan on the front end of how you're going to consistently keep releasing podcasts, it's going to fall apart and make you feel frustrated, and it'll be way too easy to give up. So make sure that you decide on the front end what you want to do, when you want to do it, and how you want to do it, okay? So our equipment, just very quickly, we use a Yeti mic, which is pretty affordable compared to the mics that are out there. And then we just use a Dragon Pad pop filter. It's like $10 on Amazon, not a big deal. And then we have headphones. I just use little headphones that plug right in. I don't even have any fancy headphones. And our sound is amazing because we picked a really great platform. And so out there in the podcasting world, there are so many platforms. You can record over Skype. You can record over Zoom. You can use Zencaster. You can use Cast, which happens to be our choice because we love the back-end editing that we don't have to do through Cast. Is really a blessing to us for our season of life and our margin and our budget and the time that we have. So we like Cast, but there's no shortage. So you do the research and figure out what exactly you want it to look like and sound like. Make sure you have great artwork. Oh my gosh, I can't even tell you how important this is. This is the one thing we did hire a designer for, a gal we loved. Her name is Leanne Aranador. You can totally email me, contact me, reach out on social media, and I'll give you her info because she's amazing. And it was really important to us that that looks great. So when you go to our Why Though podcast, it looks awesome. It's like this great cartoon looking character of us, but still so obviously us. And our podcast says Why Though, and it's really cool. And then we had her create a bunch of graphics for us. So I have some story graphics. I have some Instagram graphics. I have some Facebook graphics and some email graphics. So we had all that already. So when I'm doing graphics, I'm most often just kind of plugging things in. It's a little bit more plug and play. So again, I'm not wasting time every single week of my life creating all the images for social media that we need to. And we didn't want to look like an amateur. So we just made sure we invested into that. Intros and outros. I highly recommend the website premiumbeat.com. And so you don't want to steal a song that you might have to get in trouble for later. You want to make sure you have proper licensing if you decide to use music. And so we bought a beat on premiumbeat.com for $49. It's a one-time purchase, and that's great. And then we added our voices on top of it. I have a dear friend who's in music, so she mixed the sound for us and created the little intro outro for us. And that was really great too, because it's the first thing people hear. And so you want it to be attractive to them. You want it to sound good to them. So I'm going to actually just read you our intro. You want to tell people exactly who you are. We say, welcome to Why Though. We are your hosts, Tiffany Bloom and Ashley Abercrombie. And we land somewhere in between Biggie Smalls and Mother Teresa. And we're just wondering, why though? We all have questions, from our existential crisis curiosities to our, hey girl, why your eyebrows look so good though? And we want to tackle everything in between with you. And so it leaves us so much room. It's funny, it's engaging. Our beat is really great. It's like a good hip hop beat that we really love. And then people know what they're getting. We're consistent every single time. And then on our outro, we invite people to subscribe, to leave a comment, because it helps other people find the show. We point people to our writing, our speaking, our books, and our websites. And we say, see you next week. So people are always hearing a little bit about who we are every single week. And they can learn more about what we offer them every single week. So then we also figure out where we're going to post. All right. So that's one thing you have to figure out. We chose to do iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, and Stitcher, those 4 places, because we knew that that's where most people are. That's where they're getting their podcasts. That's where they're listening. And so that's really important to us. We have an information hub. I call it our nerve center. So we set up this crazy large Google Doc, and there's like a section for ideas. There's a section for all of our show notes per episode. There's a section for, us laying out our podcast. And how we lay out our podcast is we meet every single quarter for about 2 hours. That's all it takes us. It might take you a little longer. It might take you a day to plan and prepare, but we set aside 2 hours a quarter where we just say, hey, for the next 3 months, these are all the podcasts we're doing. And we dive into relevant topics. We're not afraid to talk about hard things. So we're going to talk about politics. We're going to talk about race. We're going to talk about justice. We're also going to talk about why hosting is important and why you need a frozen pizza at all times in case somebody comes to your house. So we're going to talk about everything in between, the huge, huge stuff down to the really small stuff. And we have great conversations. We laugh together. We have a really good chemistry. And so that's super important. And when we opened our podcast, we landed at number 47 on the religion and spirituality iTunes charts, which is huge for us. And then now we're up to 10,000 downloads a month, which puts us in the top 5% of podcasts. And so the reason I'm sharing that is not because I really care about numbers or because I think that makes us important. I'm sharing that just to say that we are regular, ordinary people who made a steady, consistent plan. And we just keep showing up and we keep offering content and we keep laughing together. We keep growing together. We're not afraid to say we don't know. We're sharing our life and being relatable. We're not telling people what to do. We're not preaching at them. And we've hit a nerve where people really want to hear what we have to say. And so we really, really love that. So we decided to release every single Thursday is when we release our podcast. You want to find a really consistent time for you to be able to do that. And then somebody recommended something really great to me, a little pro tip from a podcaster who has over 10,000 subscribers a month, which is much more than 10,000 downloads. That means about 40,000 downloads per month. So she's doing phenomenal. And what she recommended to me is that instead of doing ads, instead of being concerned about doing ads, then you might want to think about doing ads for yourself. Like you're trying to grow your platform as an author, this is a great opportunity through a podcast. Maybe in the middle of a podcast, just make an offering to your listeners. Like, hey, did you know that I have this awesome free download that will help you do X, Y, and Z? Did you know that if you go to my website today and read this, then I would love to just bless you with these cool blah, blah, blahs. You create your lead magnets in order for people to get them. And so be your own commercial on your podcast. We did this with our books. We used our podcast for 8 weeks before each of our book launches so that every single week they were hearing something related to our book. And that way people could pre-order and get engaged with the work that we were doing. So just make sure that you are helping yourself on all these different fronts, because that's what it really requires today, right? Like we have got to have lots of crossover. We got to be thinking about multiple sectors, and not in a way that feels overwhelming, like you just want to sit down, why did I even bother or try to do this? But in a way that's like, hey, I want to help myself. I don't want to double up on my work efforts. I want to really just continue to utilize the things that I have at my disposal. And I want there to be crossover. On my blog, I want to talk about my podcast. On my Instagram, I want to talk about my blog, and I want to talk about the podcast. On the podcast, I want to point people to my website and point people to my books. So just be thinking about all the ways that you can continue to use your voice and continue to create consistent, good content. So I know I fire hosed you, friend, but I hope it was a blessing to you. I hope it was even just a little bit helpful for you. And if you'd like to get connected with me, you can go to my website, www.ashabercrombie.org. And you can also find me on Instagram. It's my favorite place to be, at @AshAbercrombie. And I'm on Facebook and I'm on Twitter as well. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for spending some time with me. And again, I hope that I was a blessing to you. And we can't wait to see what you create. Thank you for your unique voice and for your incredible contribution to this world. It is exactly what we need right now.